You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. Yesterday dawned with a familiar complaint. A low throb nesting in my spine, a spot I found myself needing as I drifted towards the kitchen's promise of coffee. The house breathed its usual early morning sigh. Quietude, a crisp edge to the air, the ghost of last night's supper clinging faintly. Nothing felt amiss, nothing jarred, until my path carried me past the spare room. I halted. There, sunk into the hallway wall, was a door where no door had ever been. It occupied the space to the left, adjacent to the linen closet. A stretch of wall I knew intimately, its blankness a constant in my daily navigation. Yet this object had materialized. Plain timber, stained a deep, somber brown, punctuated by a tarnished brass knob. My heart commenced a frantic drumming against my ribs. A sheen of cold perspiration bloomed on my forehead. I stood transfixed, ransacking my memory for any precursor, any hint of construction, any whisper that this portal had existed before. There was nothing. It was undeniably new. My approach was leaden, as though the air itself had thickened to resist me. I raised a hand, hesitant towards the knob. It refused to yield, a solid, unmoving sentinel. My grip tightened. I wrenched it right, then left, utterly immobile. Locked fast, pressing my ear to the wood's grain, I strained to listen. A whisper reached me, perhaps the scuffing drag of something heavy, or merely the frantic pulse hammering in my own ears. It was elusive, unplaceable. My own respiration sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness. I held my breath, concentrating, seeking any definite sound from beyond the barrier. When I finally exhaled, the phantom noise had dissolved. Next, I tested it with my shoulder. I'm not built for brute force, but I thought to gauge its give. It met me with the unyielding finality of masonry. No groan of stressed wood, no subtle shift. A dull ache radiated from the point of impact, accompanied by a peculiar vibration that seemed to rebound up my arm, as if the door possessed an abnormal density. Crouching, I peered at the threshold, searching for a gap beneath. A sliver, barely perceptible, hinted at the floor beyond, perhaps revealing a patch of profound shadow. Or maybe just an absence of light. Once more, I assaulted the knob, giving it sharp, desperate tugs. Sweat slicked my palms. The sheer wrongness of this door, its sudden inexplicable presence, coiled unpleasantly in my gut. Houses do not simply germinate new entrances overnight. As my hand slipped from the knob, a distinct impression arose. A subtle counter-pressure from the other side, as if something unseen had braced the door against my efforts. Not forceful, but deliberate. The hammering in my chest intensified. I retreated, wiping damp hands on my trousers, my gaze fixed on the inscrutable wood. After a period of strained composure, I ventured to the garage in search of leverage. Tools for mundane repairs lined the shelves, but none were designated for extra-dimensional intrusions. Behind dusty paint cans, I located the crowbar. Shaking off debris, I returned to the hallway. The door stood unchanged, silent. I tried wedging the crowbar's tip beneath the bottom edge, but the angle proved futile. Attempting the seam between door and frame was equally fruitless. The gap was too narrow, the fit too precise. My efforts merely scored the paintwork nearby. The wood itself felt unnervingly resilient, repelling the steel tool. With each forceful attempt, that strange sense of active resistance returned, a tangible pushback. My arm began to tremble with exertion until, defeated, I let the crowbar clatter to the floor. A dull throb pulsed in my bicep. Sweat traced paths down my temples. I leaned against the opposite wall, catching my breath, a wave of dizziness washing over me. My thoughts raced, a frantic scramble for explanation. A dream, a bizarre localized amnesia, erasing some forgotten renovation. But this house was old, my tenure here long. I knew its bones, its every surface. No door had ever occupied that space. Resigned, I decided to call Leo, a friend whose trade was construction. I phrased it carefully. A troublesome door, jammed inexplicably. The part about its spontaneous manifestation remained unspoken. He promised to swing by later. Hanging up, I tried to immerse myself in routine, but the door's presence loomed, an insistent question mark etched onto my reality. I wandered the house, a restless circuit seeking anomalies. The living room slumbered peacefully. Kitchen vents remained undisturbed. The spare bedroom was untouched. Inevitably, I returned to the hallway. The door persisted, locked, impassive. Again, I pressed my ear to its surface. Silence. A tentative knock yielded nothing. A harder rap echoed unanswered, swallowed by the wood. Only the frantic rhythm of my own heart responded. I backed away, a profound sense of dislocation settling over me. The subsequent hours were a cycle of magnetic compulsion. I'd drift towards the hallway, hover near the alien threshold, grasp the knob, tug uselessly, then retreat, only to be drawn back minutes later. The knot of anxiety in my stomach tightened with each failed attempt. My breathing grew shallow, palms wiped raw on my shirt. Every effort met the same implacable refusal. The door didn't budge, didn't flex. It simply was, solid, immovable, a silent mockery. Around noon, Leo texted, "A delay at another site. He wouldn't make it." A strange mix of disappointment and relief washed over me. Perhaps I wasn't ready for corroboration, for another pair of eyes to validate this impossibility, anchoring it more firmly in the world. Night descended, draping the house in shadows. I attempted distraction via television, but my gaze kept straying towards the hallway's dark mouth. I'd left the light burning there, unnerved by the thought of that door lurking unseen in the gloom. Sleep, when it finally came, was a fractured, restless affair. Brief awakenings punctuated the darkness. Once, a soft thud resonated through the stillness. I lay rigid, listening, but silence reclaimed the house. Morning arrived, heavy and unwelcome. My first conscious thought snagged on the door. I scrambled from bed, nearly tripping in my haste. Reaching the hallway, I froze. It was gone. The wall stretched before me, smooth, uninterrupted, painted the same familiar shade I'd always known. No outline, no seam, no lingering evidence of its presence. My palms flattened against the cool plaster, seeking imperfection, a hidden joint, nothing. Fingertips traced the surface, solid, seamless. My pulse surged. I knocked, listening for a hollow resonance betraying a hidden void. Solid, I rapped along its length, knuckles seeking variation, uniformly dense. Dry-mouthed, I swallowed, struggling to reconcile the impossible. That door had been incontrovertibly real. The crowbar's futile assault, the resistance felt. They were not figments. My shoulder retained a faint soreness from its impact against the wood. Pressing the spot elicited a twinge, tangible proof. A shaky breath escaped me. Frantically, I scrolled through my phone's camera roll, praying for a forgotten snapshot, a video clip capturing the anomaly. Nothing. The oversight felt monumental. Anxiety gnawed. Had I hallucinated the entire episode? Yet the memory of the knob's cold weight, the door's stubborn solidity, the crowbar skittering off its surface. These sensations felt too visceral, too grounded in physical reality. The day unfolded under a pall of distraction. Routine tasks felt automated, my awareness tethered to the hallway. Every few minutes, the magnetic pull returned, drawing me back to stare at the blank wall, half expecting the door to shimmer back into existence. It remained stubbornly absent. Lunch went largely untouched, appetite extinguished by a persistent tension coiling in my gut. I found myself casting glances over my shoulder, perpetually braced for the door's reappearance. The world felt jittery, unreliable. Later, drawn by a desperate need for answers, I descended into the basement's musty chill. Under the weak glare of the single bulb, I scanned the overhead joists and foundation walls directly beneath the hallway section in question. No signs of alteration, no sealed openings, no inexplicable structures. The concrete floor was a continuous, undisturbed plane. Tapping the walls with my flashlight produced only solid thuds. My breath plumed in the cool air, raising gooseflesh. A shiver traced my spine. I retreated upstairs, the subterranean search yielding nothing but deeper unease. That night found me standing sentinel in the hallway once more. I extinguished the lights, plunging the space into darkness, allowing my eyes to adjust, hoping perhaps a different spectrum might reveal what daylight concealed. Minutes stretched into tense silence. Nothing shifted. The wall remained stubbornly opaque. Reluctantly, I restored the light, my body taut, heart accelerating, a fool staring at plaster, yet possessed by the unshakable conviction that something remained, hidden just beyond perception. The following morning, I armed myself with a tape measure. Hallway length, then the corresponding span within the spare bedroom, measured against the wall they shared. The numbers disagreed. Not dramatically, but consistently. A discrepancy of several inches manifested unaccounted for by standard wall thickness. I measured again and again, a sliver of space, a narrow cavity perhaps, unaccounted for in the house's aged blueprints. Not enough for a room, certainly, but an architectural inconsistency nonetheless. It prickled at the edge of my reason. Pressing my ear first to the hallway wall, then to the bedroom side, I listened intently. Silence. Knocking elicited solidity everywhere except one small patch in the bedroom. There, a subtly different resonance. A hint of hollowness, faint but discernible. My heart leaped. I tapped again, analyzing the sound, wondering if it was merely a stud placement quirk. the urge to cut into the drywall warred with a primal fear of what discovery, or lack thereof, might unleash. In the days that followed, the acute shock subsided into a chronic, low-grade dread. I performed the motions of life, washing dishes, vacuuming, answering emails. But my thoughts perpetually circled back to the vanished door. I'd catch myself pausing in the hallway, anticipating its return. My hand developed a habit of seeking out that smooth expanse of wall. It always felt cool to the touch, triggering a faint, involuntary shiver. Sleep remained elusive, punctuated by phantom bumps and taps that sent my mind racing, convinced the door was creaking open somewhere in the shadowed house. Each investigation revealed only familiar emptiness. Attempts to articulate the experience to friends proved futile. I omitted the spontaneous appearance, framing it as a suspected structural oddity. The responses ranged from dismissive jokes about hidden safes and horror film consumption to uncomfortable silence when I pressed about concealed spaces. No one offered solace or explanation. Sometimes, staring at that impassive stretch of hallway, I yearned for the door's return, if only to vindicate my sanity. Other times, raw fear grips me at the prospect. The memory of that subtle, deliberate pressure pushing back from the other side remains terrifyingly vivid. A prickling crawls across my skin, my breath hitches. I've become a reluctant anchorite, rarely venturing far from the house, haunted by the notion that my absence might invite further inexplicable changes. Morning and night, I inspect the walls. The longer I look, the more plausible the door's reappearance seems. And if it does return, my reaction remains terrifyingly uncertain. Smash it open? Flee? The question churns like acid in my stomach. My routine is fractured. Meals are forgotten. Simple chores overlooked. I pick absently at the old paint on that section of wall, revealing layers beneath, searching for a flaw, a seam. The house's silence, once comforting, now feels pregnant with unspoken tension. Every shadow seems deeper, every draft a potential harbinger. Fleetingly, peripherally, I sometimes glimpse dark brown wood. But a blink restores the blank wall, leaving only a racing pulse. Whether the door will ever grace my hallway again is unknowable. Its reality, however brief, is branded onto my memory. I touched it. I heard it. I felt its resistance. Its subsequent erasure left no physical trace, yet it carved a permanent space in my mind. Now I measure walls, tap plaster, seek discrepancies, but the house holds its secrets. Still, the conviction persists. A space I cannot reach lies dormant, occupied by something that repelled my intrusion. Each transit of that hallway resurrects the feel of the locked knob, the push from beyond, the void left by its departure. That memory is indelible, as solid and real as the door itself once was. So this is my vigil. I remain, inhabiting this house waiting. I have assimilated the impossible into my existence. A crowbar now resides in the hallway closet, a contingency against the unknown. Whether I possess the courage or folly to use it remains untested. Part of me craves the catharsis of demolition, the certainty of exposure. Another part recoils, fearing that confirmation might be worse than suspicion. For now, It exists as possibility, a chilling potential. That is burden enough. Each morning, I check. The wall remains inviolate. No knob, no frame, no portal. But the feeling, the certainty that it is the key latent, waiting, never fades. I possess no proof, no evidence to sway the skeptical. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And so I keep watch, even when oblivion seems preferable. Because if it returns, I must be ready. Perhaps next time, entry will be granted. Or perhaps I will merely stand paralyzed, staring into the impossible, forever locked outside. Either way, resolution remains elusive until that door, or the truth behind it, reveals itself. It materialized on a Thursday, nestled amongst junk mail and bills, an envelope of stark, unblemished white. My address, typed plainly, the sender, an unnerving void. A tremor of disquietude ran through me as I slid it open, anticipating the usual corporate insignia or garish advertisement. What emerged was solitude itself. A single sheet, pristine, utterly blank. I angled it towards the window's fading light, traced its texture between thumb and forefinger, scrutinized its clean-cut edges. Nothing. A foolish prank, perhaps? Vexed but untroubled, I cast the envelope aside, laying the vacant page upon my kitchen table before the currents of the day swept it from my thoughts. Later, cocooned in the living room's crepuscular embrace, my gaze drifted back to the table where the paper and its empty sheath still rested. A small candle flickered nearby, its hesitant flame a necessary concession to the room's temperamental overhead light. Some impulse, born of idleness or nascent curiosity, compelled me to retrieve the blank sheet. I held it aloft, near the candle's wavering dance. The heat kissed my fingertips. As the paper drew nearer the flame, a subtle alchemy began. Shadowy script bloomed across the surface, characters coalescing as if sketched by unseen forces. I leaned closer, pupils straining against the gloom. The genesis of a sentence formed, only to dissolve the instant I tried to fix upon it. Again, I maneuvered the page, tilting it, edging it nearer the heat. For a fleeting instant, sharp black letters stood stark against the white, fragments concerning watching, concerning you. Then silence. The page was blank once more. A visceral surge, akin to nascent panic, tightened my chest. My breath caught. Setting the paper down with unsteady hands, I extinguished the candle, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The remainder of the night unspooled in troubled contemplation. Under ordinary illumination, the paper offered no secrets, no trace of scorching or hidden ink. Lamps revealed nothing. The bathroom mirror reflected only its own impassive surface. Only the candle's proximity had coaxed forth those spectral words. Sleep remained elusive, chased away by the reverberations of that brief, unsettling glimpse. After a late, tasteless meal and a failed attempt at televised distraction, the table drew me back. Relighting the candle, I ventured again. Faint outlines ghosted into existence. I held my breath, leaning in, observing as the lines darkened. A flicker. Do not. Then oblivion, tension coiled in my neck, lock in my jaw. A third attempt, the paper held perilously close to the eager flame, yielded only the same frustrating ephemera. Do not. I am. You. Bursts of meaning that vanished before coherence could form. A rigidity seized my shoulders. A tremor started deep in my legs. Defeated, I surrendered to the night. The following day was an exercise in deliberate forgetting. Work, commute, a solitary meal. Normalcy asserted with forced conviction. Yet, beneath the facade, the letter pulsed, an unanswered question demanding attention. That evening found me seated once more before the candle's solitary flame. The house surrendered to the encroaching darkness outside. Every other light extinguished. Silence reigned, profound enough to amplify the rhythm of my own breathing. I raised the paper. The letters flickered, appearing and receding with maddening speed. I navigated the page with excruciating slowness, altering angles, desperate to capture the whole before it dissipated. The paper seemed to warm unnaturally in my grasp, while a contrary chill traced patterns down my spine each time the phantom script materialized and fled. My palm grew slick. I wiped it absently on my trousers. And then, the sounds began. Subtle at first, easily mistaken for the settling groans of the old house or the sigh of wind against the glass. But they persisted, resolving into whispers, faint, sibilant murmurs emanating from the room's periphery. I froze, my throat constricting. Setting the paper down, I scanned the shadowed corners. Emptiness greeted me, yet the whispering endured. A susurrus near the walls, beneath the table, seemingly from the very air behind my chair. Indecipherable, like breath forced through tightly clenched teeth. The fine hairs on my arms prickled upright. My pulse hammered. A dizzying lightness invaded my skull. I fought for composure. Reaching again for the paper, I held it to the flame. The letters flashed stark and urgent. Do not ignore. Before comprehension could fully register, they were gone. My breath hitched ragged. The whispers swelled, gaining an edge laced with something akin to anger. A low hiss weaving through the murmurs. Who's there? The question emerged thin, trembling. Silence answered, though the voices persisted. A knot formed in my stomach. Sweat beaded on my forehead. Feigning a bravado I didn't feel, I rose, circled the room, peered behind curtains, rattled window locks. Nothing. The whispering ebbed and flowed, but never ceased, never clarified. After an hour, maybe more, exhaustion claimed me. I blew out the candle and retreated to bed, seeking refuge I wouldn't find. Sleep was a fractured landscape of sweat-drenched awakenings and labored breaths. Night 3. I resolved to document the phenomenon. My phone, propped on the table, its voice recorder active, its camera lens aimed at the scene. The candle, centered. My hand, striving for steadiness. The paper, innocuous under the flickering light. I lifted it. Watched the familiar dance of appearance and disappearance. A phrase coalesced. Do not ignore this warning. I held my breath, trying to stabilize the page. More words surfaced. I am watching you. Vanished. A sharp exhale escaped me. The whispering erupted anew, closer now, directly behind my chair. I spun around. Nothing. The phone's microphone registered only its own faint electronic hum. I tried again with the paper, desperation mounting. A longer glimpse this time, searing itself onto my retinas. Do not ignore this warning. I'm watching you. Do not try to run. I know where you are. My heart slammed against my ribs with painful force. Sweat traced cold paths down my back. My hand shook violently, the paper nearly tumbling from my grasp. The voices intensified, a vortex of whispers swirling around me. A fleeting sensation, like fabric brushing against my arm. I flinched, looked down, empty air. Snuffing the candle, I flooded the kitchen with harsh electric light. Instantly, the whispering ceased. The room snapped back to its familiar, mundane state. I snatched up my phone. The recording showed only me, seated, holding the paper, a blank sheet on the screen. The audio captured my breathing, the candle's soft crackle. No whispers, no anomalous sounds. Frustration warred with a profound unease. I knew what I had seen, what I had heard. This wasn't imagination. My pulse still throbbed erratically. My stomach remained clenched. My legs felt weak beneath me as I stood. I prowled the house, a hunter seeking an invisible intruder, checking rooms, flinging open closets, peering behind doors. The house remained stubbornly silent, empty. The subsequent night, a new strategy. 3 candles arranged on the table, their combined light intended to illuminate, to clarify. I waited until midnight's deep stillness descended, extinguishing all other illumination. The trio of flames swayed, casting elongated, dancing shadows upon the walls. Once more, I held the paper aloft. The letters flickered faster now, more elusive than ever. I began to read aloud as they appeared, hoping the spoken word might anchor them, force permanence. "Do not ignore this warning," I recited, voice tight. "I am watching you. Do not try to run. I know where you are. I know what you..." Gone again? As I spoke, an unnatural cold seeped into the room. My breath bloomed faintly. My neck muscles were rigid cords. The whispering returned, louder, sharper, distinct words emerging from the cacophony. "Listen," one hissed. "Stay still," another commanded. A palpable presence materialized behind me, a sensation like warm breath upon the nape of my neck. I jerked my head around. Nothing. Yet the air carried a stale, musty odor, the scent of old perspiration and decay. I forced my gaze back to the paper. Blank, utterly blank. I lowered it. The whispering persisted. "What do you want?" The words scraped my throat, emerging hoarse. The candle flames leaped and sputtered, threatening to extinguish. The murmurs intensified. My palms were slick, my stomach churning. A violent tremor seized my body. I pushed back my chair, stood up, and felt something distinctly tug at my shirt hem. I stumbled backward, nearly upsetting the table. The candles wobbled precariously, but held. "Stop it!" I yelled. The sound raw in the charged silence. The whispering faltered, receded, then vanished, leaving only the frantic thunder of my own heart. I flicked on the kitchen light. The sudden glare rendered the room small, sterile. The silence now felt heavy, oppressive. Dizziness washed over me. Sleep was unthinkable. I spent the night on the couch, bathed in artificial light, my eyes fixed on the letter now resting on the coffee table. So ordinary, so terrifying. The urge to destroy it warred with an inexplicable compulsion to keep it, to solve its riddle, or perhaps a deeper fear that disposal would only escalate the unseen menace. I remained vigilant, heart leaping at every creak, every imagined tap, watching the inert paper as dawn slowly bled into the sky. Another night, another variable, a scented candle plucked from the bathroom, its faint vanilla fragrance a fragile counterpoint to the encroaching dread. Perhaps the nature of the flame itself held significance. I lit the smaller, steadier wick, held up the paper. Brief flashes, do not ignore. I watch you, cannot hide, you cannot. Then nothing. The whispering commenced, but softer, more insidious. A gentle hiss near my ear, like speech attempted through sealed lips. My chest constricted, stealing my breath. "I'm here," I managed, striving for calm. "I see your message. What do you want me to do?" A pause, pregnant with unseen tension. Then, a single, chilling whisper. "Obey." I straightened my spine. My eyes stung. Sweat trickled down my temple. I wiped it away with a trembling hand. I persisted, moving the paper with painstaking slowness, attempting to prolong the revelation, to piece together the fragmented threads. Each attempt yielded the same result: tantalizing glimpses. "Do not ignore. I know you will," snatched away before completion. The whispers seemed attuned to my frustration, swelling in volume and intensity with each failure, surrounding me, pressing in. Trapped, my throat felt like sandpaper. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the paper into the flame itself, snatching it back at the last possible second. A pattern emerged. The whispers always began immediately after I deciphered a few words, as if some entity permitted glimpses but punished attempts at full understanding, feeding on the fear it generated. I tried altering my approach, holding the paper at a distance, bringing it slowly towards the heat just until the letters bloomed, then withdrawing swiftly. It made no difference. They vanished regardless. My fist struck the table, a sharp crack in the silence. The whispers surged in response. I clenched my teeth, swallowing the scream that clawed at my throat. My body ached with sustained tension, my neck a column of stone. The frantic drumming in my chest became a dull, persistent ache. After nights blurred into an exhausting cycle, the rituals lost their novelty. Recording attempts ceased. Experiments with different light sources felt futile. I adhered to the simple, terrifying routine. The single candle, the blank paper, the fleeting words, the inevitable whispers. Each night, the same fractured threads. Each night, the suffocating presence of unseen voices thickening the air. Exhaustion became my constant companion. My eyes were perpetually bloodshot, underscored by dark circles. A fine tremor lived in my hands, noticeable even in daylight. Appetite waned. The world outside the house felt hyper-real. Every sudden noise a potential threat. Door locks were checked and rechecked with obsessive frequency. Sleep, when it came, was shallow, haunted by the unshakable feeling of being watched, of silent breath stirring the air at the foot of my bed. I never deciphered a complete sentence, never learned the message's entirety or its source. Only fragments remained, burned into memory. Do not ignore this warning. I am watching you. Do not try to run. I know where you are. I know what you do. You cannot escape. Obey. The essence was clear, the specifics forever veiled. Each attempt ended in the same state, trembling, drenched in cold sweat, enveloped by unseen malice. The whispers never stopped, not while the candle burned and the paper hovered near its flame. I understood, eventually, that clarity was not the objective. This was a torment designed without resolution. On what I swore would be the final night, I performed the ritual one last time, sat in the dark, lit the candle, held up the paper, read the familiar fleeting words, watched them dissolve. The whispers rose instantly, a swirling miasma of sound that made my skin crawl. Muscles locked tight, breath coming in shallow gasps, heart hammering, pulse roaring in my ears. The voices climbed in pitch and volume. "I've had enough!" I shouted, the words torn from me. "Stop!" They did not heed. With a surge of desperate finality, I seized the letter, crumpled it fiercely, jammed it back into its plain white envelope. Leaving the candle to gutter on the table, I fled the room. The moment I crossed the threshold, the whispering ceased, as if I had stepped out of a pocket dimension tethered to that specific convergence of paper, flame, and fear. The envelope now resides deep within a locked drawer. Sometimes, late at night, standing too near that drawer in the darkness, I fancy I hear a faint echo, a residual sibilance. But I don't open it. The lights stay on. That particular candle remains untouched. I strive to ignore the tension that permeates the house like a stain. Who sent the letter? Why? The questions remain unanswered, perhaps unanswerable. I only know that every effort to illuminate the mystery plunged me deeper into darkness, into a clammy, shaken terror accompanied by voices I could not see. Living with the uncertainty is now the only path. It is infinitely preferable to the alternative, standing willingly in the dark, courting madness, listening. I may never grasp the full message, may never be free of the letter's presence in my home, but I will not approach it with fire again. Sanity demands at least that much. Silence descended on a Wednesday night, the television screen fading to black, leaving only the hum of the house. Then a sound, a faint percussion, rhythmic, insistent, originating from the wall that backed the living room sofa. Not aggressive, merely there. A soft measured rapping, a knot tightened low in my gut. Rising, compelled, I crossed the room, the pile of the carpet whispering beneath my feet. I pressed an ear to the cool, painted plaster. Unmistakably, the tapping persisted from within. Tentatively, I answered with my own knuckle, a light reply against the surface. A pause swallowed the sound. Then it resumed, altered slightly, as if acknowledging my gesture. My pulse quickened, a frantic drummer joining the hidden one. 3 years I'd inhabited these walls. 3 years of mundane quietude, never disturbed by such an intimate, unsettling cadence. I lingered, mind racing through explanations. Plumbing settling, aberrant wearing, some small creature, disoriented and trapped. Yet the sound held no frantic scrabble, no desperate scurrying. It was deliberate, the distinct echo of a knuckle against wood. Shoving the heavy sofa aside revealed only uninterrupted plaster. My palms searched the surface, seeking flaws, loose sections, hairline cracks, or forgotten apertures. Nothing. The wall stood solid, impassive. Night after night, the phenomenon returned. Never during the stark light of day, or perhaps simply lost in its clamor. Only darkness seemed to invite it. Drawn by morbid curiosity, I began forsaking my bed for the sofa, listening. Around the 11th hour, reliably, it would commence, soft, steady, unwavering. I'd lean close, straining to isolate the source. It seemed highest near the ceiling joists. The attic then? But no attic existed above this part of the house, only the slope of the roof sheathing the sky. I fought the urge to succumb to the growing dread, yet each tap slicked my palms with sweat. dried the back of my throat. A week eroded under this subtle siege before I remembered the house plans, relics from the purchase tucked away in a closet file. At the kitchen table, I unfurled the brittle, oversized sheets. My finger traced familiar boundaries. Living room, kitchen, the single bedroom, bath, connecting hall. All congruent with the house I knew. But then, unearthed from deeper within the folder, an older schematic dated half a century prior presented a deviation. Behind the living room wall, precisely where the tapping originated, it depicted an anomaly. A small rectangular chamber marked with what appeared to be a narrow doorway. The more recent documents simply showed nothing. Void space. I stared, comparing the diagrams, the listed dimensions, the current footprint, a subtle mismatch confirmed by the archaic lines. This house harbored a ghost limb, an excised space lingering in faded ink. Disquiet coiled within me. I rubbed tired eyes, seeking logic. A renovation, perhaps, sealing off an unwanted area? But why entomb a room? Carrying the fragile blueprints into the living room, I held them against the wall, a line in landmarks, searching for the ghost of a covered threshold. The tapping was absent now, but its epicenter was known. Right below the ceiling, near the juncture. If the old drawing held true, a passage lay concealed there. From the garage, I retrieved a flashlight and a stepladder. Ascending, I rapped gently near the ceiling. A distinct hollowness answered in one specific spot. Pressing firmly, I felt a slight yield, the subtle flex of unsecured board. Descending for tools, a small hammer, a flat pry bar. I returned, heart hammering against my ribs, a tightness constricting my chest. Apprehension warred with resolve. The unknown loomed. I chipped away a small piece of plaster. Dust and aged debris rained down, stinging my eyes. Wiping my face on my sleeve, I aimed the flashlight's beam into the nascent cavity. Wood, an old beam, flanked by planking, more plaster yielded, widening the breach. An exhalation of stale, desiccated air met me. And then, behind the splintered boards, the undeniable edge of a door frame emerged. Narrow wooden, dark with age, unmistakably sealed away. My fingers, probing the darkness, brushed against cold metal. A small, simple doorknob. It turned with surprising ease, but the door itself resisted, obstructed. Using the pry bar as a lever, I worked at the imprisoning planks. Minutes of strained effort, the groan of protesting wood, and then two boards ripped free. The door swung silently inward into blackness. Climbing higher, I thrust my head and the flashlight through the opening. A cramped cell resolved itself in the beam, perhaps 8 feet square. Utterly bare, save for one object on the far wall. A single candle nestled in a small metal sconce, its flame burning with unwavering steadiness. No windows punctuated the walls. No wires suggested an electrical source. Just the solitary candle, alight and seemingly inexhaustible. A chill, unrelated to the stale air, brushed my face. The musty odor intensified. And the silence, absolute. The tapping had ceased. Swallowing against a constricted throat, I maneuvered through the opening, stepping onto the floor of the hidden room. The space was confining, the ceiling low enough to graze my hair. Bare wooden walls pressed close. Only the candle offered illumination. My gaze swept the interior, landing on something beside the flame. A painting, a portrait of me, My face stared back, but wrenched into a grotesque, impossible rictus. The eyes wide and staring, the mouth stretched into a manic crescent far beyond any natural smile. It was undeniably my likeness, rendered in the very grey t-shirt and jeans I wore at that moment. My chest seized. A clammy heat broke across my skin. Hesitantly, I approached the canvas. My legs felt unsteady, my hands trembled. The sound of my own ragged breathing filled the small space. The paint itself looked disconcertingly fresh, the strokes smooth, recently applied. I reached out, fingertips brushing the coarse wood of the simple frame. The candlelight flickered across the painted surface, animating the horrifying grin. I snatched my hand back, unsure if the movement was real or imagined. My attention shifted to the candle. Thick white wax showed no sign of depletion, no rivulets staining the holder. The flame burned preternaturally bright and still. Holding my hand above it elicited only a gentle warmth, not the searing heat expected. Compulsively, I tried to pinch the flame between thumb and forefinger. My hand shook violently. My fingertips closed around the bright wick, met warmth, but no pain, no scorching. The flame persisted untouched. I blew on it. It wavered momentarily, then returned to its placid, constant burn. I stumbled back a step, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, echoing in my ears. Escape. The thought screamed. I glanced again at the painting. Still there. My face, locked in that silent painted scream of a smile. Leaning closer, drawn and repelled, I saw the meticulous detail, the unnerving care in its execution. The painted eyes glistened with a wet, glassy quality. The teeth, bared in that strained grimace, seemed too numerous. The portrait's gaze felt direct, accusatory. Backing away until my shoulders met the rough wood of the opposite wall, I struggled for comprehension. A sealed room, a deathless candle, a portrait of myself painted in the present moment. I looked down, touched the fabric of my own shirt. Identical. The painting bore no scent of fresh oil, yet its surface radiated newness. Turning, I explored the confines of the cell, tapping the walls. Solid. My hands traced the grain of the wood. No other features, no vents, no windows, nothing but the open doorway through which I'd entered. Beyond it lay the ragged hole in my living room ceiling, the familiar world now distant. Only the flashlight beam and the candle's strange glow pierced the gloom. A profound sense of transgression washed over me, a certainty that I stood where I should not. Nausea churned. My mouth was parchment. A decision formed. The painting had to come out. Approaching it again, I gripped the frame with both hands and lifted. It came away from the wall easily, revealing only bare wood behind it. Clutching it, I moved towards the opening. The canvas seemed to possess an odd inertia, a weight disproportionate to its size. My legs trembled on the ladder as I carefully backed down into the living room. The painting held tight against my chest, a shield or a burden. I leaned it against the wall, bathing it first in the flashlight's beam, then switching on a nearby lamp. In the fuller light, the image remained unchanged. My face, stretched in that rictus of false joy, evoking a terrible muscular strain. Instinctively, I touched my own face. Normal. Jaw tight, but not smiling. I searched the canvas for a signature, an artist's mark, nothing. Just me, in grey t-shirt and jeans. My current attire. Rationality scrambled for purchase. A complex prank. A bizarre legacy left by a previous owner. But the synchronicity of the clothing, the impossible physics of the candle. My pacing stirred dust motes in the lamplight. Again and again, my eyes darted to the painting, willing it to shift, to offer a clue. It remained static, mocking. I ascended the ladder once more, peering into the hidden chamber. The candle flame held steady, a small, defiant star in the darkness. Would removing the painting alter anything? I scanned the cramped space again. It felt starker now, violated. Listening intently, I heard only silence. The tapping remained absent. I swept the flashlight beam across every surface. Wood, dust, the unwavering candle in its sconce. Driven by a final impulse, I stepped back inside and grasped the candle's base, pulling hard. It refused to yield, the holder firmly anchored. Twisting proved futile. The flame burned on, indifferent. My throat tightened. Touching the flame again confirmed its strange nature. Warm air, nothing more. Defeated, I retreated, the tension settling into a deep ache in my neck and shoulders. In the kitchen, I placed the painting face down on the table. The reverse offered no secrets. Simple wooden stretchers, taut canvas. I ran a finger along the edge, picked tentatively at a corner. The paint adhered stubbornly. Standing there, holding the object, breathing shallowly, sweat cooling on my back, I felt adrift. A dish rag pressed against my forehead did little to soothe the internal fever. The blueprints lay spread on the counter. The old plan asserting the room's existence. The new plan denying it. The sealed door. The thought of calling someone, a contractor, a friend, surfaced, then dissolved. What explanation could I offer? Returning to the living room, flashlight off, I stared at the crudely patched hole in the ceiling. Through the remaining gaps, I could just discern the candle's faint glimmer, now seeming to flicker slightly, perhaps disturbed by the draft. A sudden overwhelming urge arose. Seal it away. Erase the discovery. I climbed the ladder a final time, carefully replacing the dislodged boards, hammering a few nails back into place with trembling hands. A spare piece of drywall from the garage served as a temporary cover. Plastering, painting, tasks for later. For now, concealment was paramount. Descending, my gaze fell upon the painting, leaning against the wall, its back still turned, but I knew what it depicted. That grin clawed at my composure. Turning it to face the wall felt like a necessary, if futile, defense. Silence reigned, no tapping, just the familiar nocturnal sighs of the house. In the bathroom mirror, my own reflection stared back, eyes bloodshot and weary, jaw clenched. Cold water splashed on my face brought momentary relief. Back on the sofa, I surveyed the scene. The wall, quiescent, the ceiling, patched, the painting, hidden from view. I ran fingers through my hair, consciously slowing my breathing, time stretched, marked only by the refrigerator's low hum. Nothing happened, yet calm refused to settle. My palms remained damp. Each time my eyelids drooped, the painted grin flashed behind them. Morning arrived, grey and uncertain. I opened the hall closet. The painting leaned where I'd left it, behind stacked boxes. Unchanged, still me, still smiling that soul-chilling smile. I closed the door firmly, walking away with the intention of disposal, of forgetting. But the knowledge remained, an indigestible lump of dread. The room behind the wall, the patched ceiling, and the candle forever burning in the sealed-up dark. The echo of those first footfalls hasn't faded. Not really. It was deep into the night's nadir, perhaps 1 o'clock, and I was sequestered in my small watch office, tucked away near the ground floor's rear corridor. A sepulchral silence reigned, punctuated solely by the low, electric thrum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Then, erupting from the stillness, came the sound. A distinct tread on the floor directly above. Not hurried, not languid, but possessed of an unnervingly steady cadence. A tremor ran up my spine. My breath hitched, suddenly shallow in my chest. I sat frozen, straining my ears, grappling with the possibility of auditory illusion, but the steps persisted. A rhythmic march lasting maybe 30 seconds before dissolving into the quiet. Immediately, I scrutinized the security monitors, my eyes scanning the feeds. Nothing. Only snow, a blizzard of static where the relevant camera view should have been. That night unlocked something. My name is Ilyas. For nigh on 2 years, I've been the nocturnal guardian of this aging commercial edifice. Once a bustling hive of offices and modest enterprises, its corridors now echo mostly with emptiness, since the owner's rent hike drove the majority away last year. A scant few businesses cling on, their lights extinguished by 6 or 7 each evening come midnight. The structure is utterly deserted, save for myself and, occasionally, a diligent soul burning the midnight oil in the second-floor shared workspace. Though even they invariably depart by 10 or 11. After that, solitude is my only companion. It rarely troubled me. Gregariousness isn't my nature. My vigil commences at 9 p.m., concluding as the first hints of dawn streak the sky at 5. The routine is simple, almost liturgical. A circuit of each floor, verifying locked doors, ensuring no vagrant has sought refuge within. The usual custodial rites. My command post is a modest desk in an office just behind the grand, desolate lobby, where I oversee the array of security screens. Nights previously were spent adrift in the digital sea of phone apps or skimming inconsequential articles online. But since the advent of the footsteps, a persistent tension holds me captive. The second visitation occurred earlier, perhaps past midnight. I'd just completed my second patrol, a methodical sweep of the building. Procuring a coffee from the lobby's humming vending machine, I ambled back to my station. Mere moments later, they returned. Those same measured footfalls, this time seemingly emanating from the 3rd floor. A film of perspiration prickled my forehead. Setting down the lukewarm coffee, I rose, flashlight clutched tight, and ascended the stairs. Each step upward felt weighted, unnaturally heavy. My heart hammered against my ribs, my breathing quickening. Upon reaching the 3rd floor, I found nothing. The corridor stretched before me, vacant and silent. My flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, probing corners, even sweeping the vacant restrooms. Emptiness greeted me everywhere. Returning to my office, I rewound the security recordings. Yet again, the third-floor cameras displayed only chaotic static during the precise interval I'd heard the sounds. Every other camera, on every other floor, remained perfectly lucid. That was the first chilling confirmation. Something was deliberately interfering with the visual record. In the nights that followed, the footsteps became a more frequent companion. Always post-midnight, sometimes 12:15, sometimes closer to 1. Their location varied. Occasionally distant, like a phantom pacing the far end of the uppermost corridor. Other times alarmingly proximate, so near I'd brace myself, expecting a figure to glide past my open doorway. Each instance spurred me into action, a frantic check of the suspected area, always culminating in the same discovery: absolute vacancy. And always, the cameras covering that zone succumbed to static blindness the moment the sounds manifested. I attempted rationalizations: electrical quirks, the groans of an old structure settling, the lament of aging pipes. Buildings do creak, I knew that, but these weren't indiscriminate groans. These were footsteps, deliberate and sequential, possessing a distinct rhythm. A pattern began to emerge. A brief walk, a pause, another short burst of steps, another pause. It felt disturbingly familiar, like someone mirroring my own patrols. Sleep became elusive after a week of this nightly performance. Daylight hours found me lying abed, haunted by visions of those vacant corridors, the phantom tread echoing in my mind's ear. My supervisor dismissed my tentative report, attributing it to fatigue, the strain of too many solitary hours. So, I ceased mentioning it, resolving to unravel this mystery alone. One night, driven by a need for validation, for proof against encroaching madness, I positioned my phone on the third floor, aimed down the corridor, and initiated a recording. Leaving it there, a silent sentinel, I retreated downstairs to wait. Around 1 a.m., the familiar cadence began anew, directly overhead, third floor. I waited, pulse thrumming, until the sound faded. Then, I bolted upstairs to retrieve my device. The playback yielded only frustration. 30 seconds of normal footage, then impenetrable blackness, the audio devolving into a high-frequency whine, precisely when the footsteps should have been captured. A knot tightened in my stomach. How? The phone had been functional, battery full, memory ample, yet the file was corrupted, sabotaged during the critical window. A few nights later, resolve hardened within me. I would confront this unseen presence. Around midnight, I commenced my rounds as usual, but with a difference. I lingered in certain spots, listening intently, hoping to provoke the phenomenon while I was physically present on the same floor. Silence. I continued my ascent, reaching the second floor, pausing near the elevator bank, waiting, listening. Then faintly at first, the steps commenced above. Third floor. Without conscious thought, I surged up the stairs, bursting onto the third floor landing. The footsteps ceased abruptly. Every muscle in my body coiled tight. The beam from my flashlight jittered, betraying the tremor in my hands. Corner after corner. Empty. Restrooms. Deserted. A wave of faintness washed over me. My legs suddenly weak, I forced slow, deliberate breaths, fighting for composure. Drawn to the windows at the corridor's end, I pressed a hand against the cold glass. Below, the street lay shrouded in darkness, relieved only by the intermittent flicker of a distant street lamp. Occasional cars sliced through the night, their passage offering no solace. Turning, I surveyed the long, still corridor behind me. Utter stillness. Descending the stairs back towards my office, a thought crystallized, chilling in its implication. The pattern of the footsteps. It seemed to follow the sequence of my own patrols. First floor, second, third. Sometimes I started high and worked down, other times the reverse. These spectral steps also progressed floor by floor, though not always mirroring my immediate direction. A creeping suspicion took root. They were mimicking me, adhering to my schedule, just temporarily offset. As more nights bled one into the next, the footsteps drew undeniably nearer my sanctuary. Initially confined to the upper levels, they descended to the second floor, directly above my head. Then, inevitably, I began to hear them in the very corridor leading to my office door. By the time they reached the ground floor hallway, raw panic clawed at the edges of my composure. Each time the sound approached, I'd sit rigid, heart pounding like a drum against my ribs, gaze fixed on the door handle, anticipating its turn. It never moved, but the footsteps would halt just outside. A palpable presence, lingering for moments before receding. One evening, I devised a new stratagem. Filmed the monitors themselves with my phone, captured a precise moment of transition from image to static, synchronized with the sound. Around 1:45, the familiar tread began on the ground floor. I aimed my phone at the monitor, displaying the hallway just outside my door. As the footsteps grew louder, closer, the image on the screen flickered violently, then dissolved into gray, impenetrable static. Through the phone's microphone, the amplified footsteps sounded distorted, almost mechanical, before abruptly ceasing. A second later, the static vanished, revealing the empty hallway once more. Reviewing the recording confirmed it. Clear hallway, sudden static concurrent with the distorted steps, then clear hallway again. I saved the file, another piece of baffling, inconclusive evidence. Weeks dissolved into a month of this auditory siege. The prospect of work instilled a gnawing dread. My supervisor observed my frayed nerves, my jumpiness, but I mumbled excuses about stress. He offered a transfer to the day shift, a tempting escape, but the reduced pay was untenable. I needed the money. So, the night shift remained my burden. I started keeping a radio playing softly in the office, a bulwark of mundane noise against the encroaching strangeness. It offered scant comfort. The distinct cadence of the footsteps invariably sliced through the background chatter whenever they began. One night, I altered my routine significantly, starting my rounds earlier, around 10:30, hoping to finish quickly and barricade myself in the office until dawn. I moved unconventionally. First floor, then second, then third, checking each dormant office, each locked door. While inspecting a supply closet on the second floor, a sudden stark realization struck me. The footsteps always mirrored the path I had taken the previous night. A test was imperative. That night, I deliberately scrambled my route. Fourth floor first, then down to the first, up to the third, concluding on the second. A chaotic sequence, utterly unlike my usual methodical progression. The following night, precisely as I suspected, the footsteps commenced on the fourth floor, descended to the first, ascended to the third, and finished on the second. The confirmation landed like a physical blow, heavy in my chest. Whatever this phenomenon was, it was meticulously replicating my exact movements, delayed by 24 hours. No rational framework could contain this fact. It fractured my sense of reality, yet I clung to a semblance of calm. Armed with this disturbing knowledge, my patrols became strategic experiments. I began leaving subtle markers: a waste bin nudged slightly askew, a sliver of tape affixed to the floor, hoping to observe any corresponding disturbance. Occasionally, the markers would be reset to their original positions by morning, yet the act itself remained unseen, unrecorded. The cameras, predictably, offered only static during the crucial moments. On a night thick with tension, close to 1 a.m., the familiar tread echoed down from the third floor. It traversed the second floor corridor directly overhead. Then, the sound shifted to the stairwell, descending toward the ground floor. I positioned myself beside my office door, flashlight extinguished, holding my breath, striving for utter silence. My heart hammered. I felt the pulse throbbing in my temples. The footsteps reached the end of my hallway, paused, silence stretched, taut and suffocating. Then, they resumed, retreating back towards the stairs. Relief washed over me, cold and unsettling, laced with an indefinable dread. Keys rattling slightly in my trembling hand, I locked the office door and gave chase, maintaining a cautious distance, fear warring with the desperate need to understand. My own shoes scuffed softly on the tiles, betraying my presence. The footsteps ascended to the second floor. I followed, heart pounding. Just as I reached the landing, they stopped. The corridor stretched before me, utterly empty. I scanned the length of it, breathing raggedly. A minute passed in profound stillness. Methodically, slowly, I checked each office door along the hall. Nothing disturbed, nothing amiss. Yet the sensation of being watched prickled the skin on my arms. Defeated, I retreated to my office, sinking into the worn chair. The monitors displayed clear, uninterrupted feeds. No further footsteps disturbed the silence for the remainder of the night. I spent the ensuing hours lost in futile conjecture. Why was this happening? The only recurring thought, however illogical, was of some unseen entity mirroring my existence within these walls, tracing my paths, echoing my presence. The unease deepened, becoming a permanent resident in my gut. By the following week, I was barely holding myself together. I investigated everything: the electrical grid, the aging ventilation system, the warped floorboards, seeking any mundane explanation. Nothing surfaced. Tentative inquiries with the few remaining tenants yielded little. A couple admitted hearing odd noises, but dismissed them as my own nightly rounds. No one else seemed concerned, amplifying my isolation. The breaking point arrived during a midnight patrol of the second floor. I was moving cautiously, ears straining for the anticipated sound. It began below, on the first floor, but different this time. Faster, urgent, ascending the stairs towards me. I froze mid-corridor, flashlight gripped so fiercely, my knuckles ached white. The footsteps bounded onto the second floor landing, then paused. Instinctively, I backed away. my breath catching in ragged gasps. Then, they advanced towards me, step by deliberate step, matching the exact pace, the exact rhythm I used when traversing this very hallway. A vice clenched around my chest. The frantic beat of my own heart roared in my ears. I spun, fleeing towards the nearest stairwell leading down. I scrambled back to the perceived safety of my office, slammed the door, twisted the lock. On the monitor, the corridor camera dissolved into static. When the image resolved moments later, the hallway was empty, but I heard them. The footsteps were right outside my door. My hand shook so violently, the flashlight slipped, clattering to the floor. Fumbling, I retrieved it, flicking the beam on, aiming it uselessly at the solid wood. Then, as suddenly as they arrived, the footsteps moved away, receding down the hall. Silence returned. Now each night is a vigil. I wait for the footsteps. I track their progress, noting the times, observing the inevitable electronic blindness on the monitors. What else is there to do? No perpetrator is ever revealed, yet the spectral tread faithfully retraces my path from the night before. They draw nearer still, their nature and purpose shrouded in impenetrable mystery. I only know that when midnight approaches, every nerve is taut, every shadow seems deeper, every faint sound amplified. This is my reality now. I endure, bound by necessity, by the need for a paycheck. But the certainty persists. Something walks these halls with me, a phantom echo of my own routine. And night after night, logic fails, explanations crumble, leaving only the unnerving rhythm of my own footsteps, mirrored in the desolate dark. All I can do is listen, record, and fight. The rising tide of panic each time the echo answers back. Mid-stride, lungs burning, Elias paused, hands braced on his knees beneath the towering indifferent canopy. Late afternoon sun slanted through the dense woods, dappling the leaf litter on the seldom trod path. He, Finn, Silas, and Leo had sought this remoteness, lured by whispers of solitude and untamed vistas far from the clamor of civilization. Ancient trees stood sentinel, their foliage thick, whispering secrets with every faint gust that stirred the dry leaves. This felt like forgotten territory. Then, lifting his gaze to the serrated edge of the tree line, Elias saw it. A point of light, perhaps golf ball-sized from this distance, a fierce white mote suspended against the deepening blue. Not static, no. It pulsed with tiny, erratic jerks, a drone piloted by a novice perhaps, yet utterly silent. He strained his ears, searching for the faintest thrum, the buzz of machinery. Only his own ragged breath and the crunch of Silas shifting his weight on the packed earth reached him. Wiping a bead of sweat from his brow, he gestured. Finn squinted, offering tentatively. Reflection, maybe? High-altitude plane? Elias shook his head. The movement was too aberrant. It darted left, then right, ascended abruptly, held stock still, then shifted again. Against the immaculate canvas of the sky, its brilliance flared whenever it navigated a gap in the leaves. Leo wrestled his phone out, aiming the lens upward, but the absence of signal rendered the attempt futile. The screen displayed only a jittering speck of white. He swore softly. Probably nothing, he muttered, though the crease between his brows deepened. Unease settled upon them all. This isolated path offered no obvious vantage points. no logical reason for surveillance. They hadn't crossed paths with another soul all day. A silent consensus formed. Move on. Their objective lay miles ahead. A campsite nestled near a stream. They fell into a determined rhythm, their eyes drawn irresistibly upwards whenever the canopy allowed. The light became their silent, unnerving companion, drifting above the trees to their left. It would wink out behind thick boughs, granting moments of fragile hope, only to reappear further ahead, or impossibly behind them. Such velocity, such silence. It defied reason. No whisper of displaced air, no mechanical sigh. The lowering sun bled across the horizon, painting the sky in hues of departure, and with it, their earlier levity dissolved into taut vigilance. Silas would tap Elias's arm, a silent gesture toward its latest manifestation. Finn, his patience fraying, finally broke the quiet, bellowing a raw "Hey!" into the indifferent trees. The light offered no acknowledgement, merely continuing its spectral ballet in and out of view. When it vanished, a different tension coiled in Elias's stomach, a dryness seizing his throat. Each disappearance felt like a prelude, a repositioning for a reveal closer, perhaps directly overhead. Conversation dwindled to the rhythmic crunch of boots, the jangle of gear. An hour or more elapsed before they reached a small clearing, marked by fallen logs and a blessedly flat expanse, their intended haven for the night. The promised stream murmured nearby. Down a gentle slope, coolness began to bite the air as the sky transitioned from orange to bruised pink. Elias shrugged off his pack, the relief in his shoulders immediate but fleeting. His legs throbbed. He took a long pull from his water bottle, the liquid doing little to ease the arid scratch in his throat. He scanned the perimeter. Empty. The others searched the tree line too, finding nothing. "Maybe it's gone," Finn suggested, his voice lacking conviction. "Sun angle on something metallic, now that it's setting." None of them truly bought it. The light's movements had felt too deliberate, too controlled. But lacking any better explanation, they let the silence answer. Camp setup proceeded with minimal exchange. Elias unfurled his tent, the familiar routine a small anchor, driving stakes into resistant earth, stretching the rainfly taut, arranging his sleeping bag within. Leo coaxed a blue flame from his camp stove, eating rations whose scent failed to stir any appetite in Elias. Silas remained vigilant, his gaze sweeping the darkening crowns of the trees as if expecting an imminent descent. Finn fussed with his headlamp, adjusting the strap, his glances darting nervously into the encroaching shadows. As true darkness enveloped them, headlamps and flashlights carved cones of visibility into the woods, making the surrounding forest feel tighter, the trees pressing closer. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every snap of a twig sent jolts through Elias. He picked at his planned dinner, the unease of physical presence in his gut. Above, the stars emerged with piercing clarity, a celestial tapestry undimmed by city glow. Yet his attention kept returning to the empty spaces, anticipating the return of that singular, intrusive gleam. Only the familiar nocturnal chorus reached him. The thrum of insects, the sigh of the breeze, the furtive skittering of unseen creatures. They spoke in hushed tones. Finn proposed a watch rotation. "Just safer," he murmured. No one disagreed. The shared vigilance felt like the only balm for their frayed nerves. Elias volunteered for the first shift, settling onto a log, headlamp extinguished to conserve power, flashlight clutched in his hand. He listened, attuned to any deviation from the forest's natural rhythm. Perhaps 30 minutes passed. Then he saw it, hovering above the trees on the far side of the clearing. The same light. A chill radiated through his chest. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, raising it, casting its beam toward the silent observer. It remained, unperturbed, bobbing slightly. He crossed quickly to Silas's tent, whispering his name. Silas emerged, disoriented, blinking. His eyes found the light, and he froze. Finn and Leo were aroused next, emerging groggy, their own beams joining the interrogation of the darkness. They stood together, a small huddle of illuminated faces turned upward, words failing them. Elias felt the fine hairs on his arms prickle. His heart hammered against his ribs, his breathing shallow. The light dipped behind the trees, then reappeared on the opposite side, having seemingly circumnavigated their small sanctuary. Leo tried shoutings again, a strained query. "Who's there? What do you want?" Silence answered. Silas retrieved a high-powered flashlight from his pack. He switched it on, aiming its potent beam directly at the anomaly. For a heartbeat, the shaft of light sliced through the night, starkly illuminating branches and leaves. But the source itself remained elusive, perpetually just beyond clear sight or masked by foliage. After a few tense seconds, the light simply winked out. Silas let out a frustrated hiss. Leo spat onto the dirt, rubbing his arms against a sudden chill. A hurried, low-voiced counsel ensued. Night navigation through unfamiliar, rugged terrain was too perilous. They possessed trail experience, but not the confidence for a panicked flight armed only with handheld lights. The decision was unanimous. Wait for dawn. Pack up. Backtrack. Staying felt untenable. The feeling of being scrutinized by an unknown entity had become unbearable. They lingered for a while, sweeping their beams across the trees, hoping, perhaps dreading, its return. It did not reappear. Eventually, exhaustion outweighed vigilance. They retreated to their tents, agreeing to maintain a staggered, wakeful presence through the remaining hours. Elias crawled into his sleeping bag, lined rigid, listening. Sleep offered little refuge. The image of the silent darting point of light replayed behind his eyelids. He rubbed his temples, forcing himself to breathe slowly. Eventually, weariness claimed him. He surfaced from fractured dreams to Silas's urgent whisper and insistent shake. "It's back." Stumbling from the tent, rubbing the sleep grit from his eyes, Elias followed Silas's pointing finger toward the dark wall of trees. Empty blackness. "It was there," Silas insisted, his voice tight. "Circling." Elias didn't doubt him. They stood sentinel for long minutes, probing the dark with their beams, illuminating only familiar leaves and bark. Defeated by exhaustion, Elias retreated to his sleeping bag. Silas lingered, a lone silhouette against the dying embers, before eventually succumbing too. Sunlight, crisp and mundane, eventually filtered through the canvas. Elias emerged, stiff-necked, to find Leo coaxing a reluctant flame beneath a pot of water, his eyes underscored by sleeplessness. Finn sat hunched on a log, combing fingers through tangled hair. Silas was already wrestling his sleeping pad into submission. The unspoken consensus was palpable. Escape. Breakfast was a choked-down energy bar, coffee bitter on the tongue. We dismantled camp with grim efficiency. The forest now just trees and earth under the impartial morning glare. No sign of the nocturnal visitor. We retraced our steps, boots pounding a steady rhythm against the trail. Eyes constantly scanned the tree line, but the sky remained empty. Elias focused on the simple mechanics of walking, the burn in his thighs, the damp patch forming between his shoulder blades. The air held the clean scent of pine and damp earth. Silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. Every so often, Finn would cast a glance over his shoulder. Silas's gaze remained mostly skyward, hand shading his eyes. Hours crawled by. The hike, intended as rejuvenation, had become an ordeal. Around midday, halting in a slightly wider patch of trail to consult the map, sustenance felt like a chore. Jerky chewed without appetite, water swallowed past a constricted throat. Leo's gaze swept the ridge lines incessantly. Elias mirrored him. Nothing but bright sun on green leaves. They pushed on. Perhaps an hour later, a flicker. Off to the side, high on a distant slope. Elias froze, his breath catching. He pointed, wordless. The others saw it. A low curse from Finn. Silas's jaw hardened. Leo fumbled for his phone, a futile gesture ending in a shaky, indistinct flare on the screen. The light, elusive as ever, seemed to pace us, dipping behind trees, reappearing, always maintaining its distance, parallel to their path. Elias tried a shuffling jog. It matched his pace. He slowed. It mirrored him. Observation, palpable, unnerving. He tightened his pack straps, tasting the salt of sweat on his lips, and pushed onward. His stomach clenched. After an indeterminate time, it vanished once more. They continued, each footfall heavy. Elias noted Silas's white-knuckled grip on his trekking poles. Finn shook his head almost imperceptibly at intervals. Leo rubbed the back of his neck, leaving red marks. Elias concentrated purely on forward motion, on escape. The hours bled together. Finally, the trees began to thin. A familiar trail marker, a wooden bench near a refuse bin. Landmarks from the previous day, relief potent but incomplete, washed over him. They were perhaps half an hour from the ranger station. Sunlight warmed his neck. A final backward glance revealed nothing but sun-drenched wilderness. The light was gone. He craved walls, doors, the mundane presence of other people. They reached the ranger station in the late afternoon, walking directly to their vehicle in the dusty lot. Finn turned the key, the engine roaring to life, a welcome sound. Doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. No one spoke of what they had witnessed. The shared imperative was simply to leave this place, this experience, behind them. As the car pulled away, Elias felt a measure of tension release from his shoulders, but his mind held fast to the image of that silent, hovering, inexplicable light. Had others seen it? The question hung unanswered. Reporting it felt impossible, inviting disbelief, requiring explanations they didn't possess. They just drove home. Text messages flickered between them in the following days. Brief check-ins, avoiding the core subject. A tacit agreement to let it lie. Yet, the memory remained indelible. The dry throat, the frantic pulse, the cold sweat tracing his spine as he looked up to see that impossible thing tracking them through the trees. It was not something Elias would forget. It was not something he ever wished to encounter again. Three days into claiming my inheritance, Uncle Ronan's skeletal farmhouse clinging to this wind-scoured island. My fingers closed around the key. It lay buried in the sedimentary clutter of his desk drawer amidst brittle receipts and desiccated ink pens. Small brass, its surface oxidized to a near black patina. An insignificant discovery, perhaps, had it not been for the intricate knotwork, distinctly Celtic, etched into its head. My hands, already grimed from excavating decades of Ronan's accumulated life detritus, paused. This bequest, this remote County Clare property perched on the Atlantic's edge, had arrived like a bolt from the blue. My acquaintance with Uncle Ronan was fleeting, confined to 2 childhood visits, hazy with the scent of pipe smoke and the impression of a formidable beard. Now at 35, the ink still drying on divorce papers, I was the improbable custodian of a house left to the mercy of the elements since, it seemed, the days of Thatcher and Reagan. The farmhouse demanded resurrection. Rain wept through the roof in triplicate. The plumbing groaned like a beast in its death throes. Dust lay thick as funeral shrouds upon every surface. Yet it was mine. After Maeve's departure, taking not just half our shared finances, but the lion's share of my equilibrium. This forgotten fragment of ancestry felt like the last bastion against utter dissolution, a chance to rebuild from the ground up. The attic's hidden portal revealed itself on my 4th day, concealed beneath a faded rug in Ronan's study, a chamber claustrophobic with listing bookshelves. The tarnished brass ring set into the floorboards matched the key precisely, slotted into the heavy padlock that secured the trapdoor. The key turned with a tortured screech, showering the floorboards with flakes of rust. No ladder awaited. Peering upwards into the square maw yielded only absolute blackness. I wrestled my stepladder from the truck bed, the ascent into the attic proving an awkward contortion. My flashlight beam sliced through the stale air, illuminating the expected chaos. Spectral furniture, draped in white sheets, cardboard sarcophagi, overflowing with papers, trunks and valises, huddled against the canted roofline. And there, positioned with deliberate centrality upon the dusty floorboards, sat a substantial wooden chest. Roughly 3 feet in length and perhaps 2 high, fashioned from dark timber, reinforced with iron bands, it possessed an unsettling distinction. Unlike its neglected neighbors, its surface was immaculate, recently wiped clean. Another brass padlock, twin to the one on the trap door below, secured it. The key obliged this lock too. Inside, a cascade of photographs, hundreds loose and unsequenced, tumbled forth as the lid lifted. All were monochrome, many bearing the sepia tint of advanced age. As I began sorting through them, a pattern emerged. The subject was invariably the same man. Tall, lean, dark-haired, his expression perpetually grave. Uncle Ronan, captured in his younger years. The images appeared to chart a course across several years. In some, his hair was a deeper black, his features less etched by time. In others, the first frost of grey feathered his temples. Yet two constants held true across every single print. Ronan was always depicted alone, and invariably, something or someone observed him from the periphery. It wasn't immediately apparent. The first photograph I studied, set within what seemed a farmhouse kitchen, held my focus on Ronan's familiar face. Only as I moved to set it aside did my gaze snag on the figure stationed in the doorway behind him. A dark shape, barely more than a silhouette, yet undeniably humanoid in scale and form. The emulsion there was blurred, distorted, as if by camera shake or some flaw in the developing. Yet I could discern the impression of a head angled towards Ronan's unguarded back. A cold moisture slicked my palms as I sifted through the stack with growing unease. Ronan tending the stony garden plot. A smudge of darkness lurking just beyond the dry stone wall. Ronan lost in a book by the hearth, the window framing both him and that indistinct sentinel behind the glass. Ronan trudging down the boreen for the post, and there, nestled amongst the skeletal trees, that familiar tenebrous shape, always oriented towards him, always watchful. No dates marked the photos, but the cyclical passage of seasons was plain. Trees leafing and shedding, drifts of snow, the ephemeral bloom of wildflowers. Through it all, the figure persisted. Sometimes nearer, sometimes more distant, yet its presence was a chilling constant. Observing, perpetually observing. My hands trembled violently by the time I reached the chest's wooden base. The final image captured Ronan seated at his desk. This very desk where the key had lain hidden. He looked older here, closer to the man dimly recalled from childhood. The figure occupied the room's corner, and though characteristically blurred, I felt a sickening certainty that it stood closer than in any preceding photograph. I thrust the pictures back into the chest, slamming the heavy lid shut. The sound reverberated in the confines of the attic, abruptly shrinking the space, pressing in on me. I scrambled down the stepladder, hauled it up, and fumbled the trapdoor closed. My fingers shook so badly that securing the padlock became a clumsy ordeal. That night, the footfalls began. I lay rigid in bed, attempting to impose rational explanations upon the photographic evidence. Double exposures, perhaps? An abandoned artistic project? Pareidolia, born of stress and isolation? The old house was a symphony of groans and sighs, settling foundations, creaking floorboards, the wind keening in the eaves. I'd grown accustomed to its nocturnal chorus. But this was different. This sound emanated from directly above my bedroom, from the attic. Slow, deliberate steps traversing the space from one end to the other. Back and forth. Back and forth. Access was solely through the trapdoor I had meticulously examined. The stepladder remained downstairs, propped against the study wall. The trapdoor was securely locked. I confirmed it myself, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, the padlock gleaming dully in my flashlight's beam. Yet the footsteps persisted overhead. Fine dust motes drifted down from the ceiling with each tread. I stood frozen in the study below. Light trained on the trapdoor, listening to something base within a space that ought to be empty, that ought to be inaccessible. Sleep eluded me that night, and the next. The footsteps returned with the darkness, tracing the same inexorable path, back and forth, back and forth, like a caged thing, like something waiting. On the third day, driven by a gnawing need for answers, I turned to Uncle Ronan's papers. The desk drawers disgorged a lifetime's documentation. Letters, invoices, notebooks filled with his cramped, spidery script. Mostly mundane details. Grocery lists, utility statements, notes on tractor repairs. But in the bottom drawer, concealed beneath a stack of yellowed newspapers, lay a leather-bound journal. The initial entry bore the date 1975. It watches me again. I perceive it everywhere now. Initially dismissed as imagination, mere tricks of light and shadow, but the photographs are irrefutable. It resides in every frame, drawing nearer. Its purpose remains obscure. Why it selected me, unknown. But its patience is infinite, relentlessly patient, always watching, always waiting, never speaking, never moving when directly observed, just watching, eternally watching. The entries spanned years, chronicling Ronan's futile efforts to escape his silent pursuer. Journeys to Dublin, to London, even a 6-month sojourn in America proved fruitless. It shadowed his every move, always watching, always waiting. The tone grew increasingly desperate over time. The final entry was dated a mere fortnight before his death. It is inside the house now. I hear it in the night, walking in the attic, seeking ingress. The trapdoor is locked, but that barrier is temporary. All barriers are temporary. It is so close now. Reflections betray its presence, standing just behind me, over my shoulder. Always indistinct, always blurred, yet clarifying daily. Soon its face will resolve. I dread seeing its face. God preserve me, I do not wish to see its face. Ronan's death certificate lay nearby. Official verdict: cardiac arrest. He was discovered in his study, slumped across the desk. His countenance, the police report noted laconically, bore signs of extreme terror. The footfalls are louder now. They're no longer confined to the night. Sometimes, in the flat light of midday, I hear that slow, measured pacing traversing the ceiling above. Sometimes, there is scratching too. A dry, furtive sound, as if something seeks purchase, seeks a way through. Yesterday, yielding to a morbid impulse, I took a photograph of myself with my phone. I deleted it instantly, but not before the image registered. That blurred distortion hovering behind me, just over my shoulder. Now, when I catch my reflection in darkened windows or mirrors, I perceive a flicker at the edge of vision, a swift movement withdrawing just as I turn. The photographs remain sealed within the chest in the attic. The thought occasionally surfaces, to ascend once more, to scrutinize them with forensic intensity. Perhaps a detail was overlooked. Perhaps some clue to this entity's nature, its desires, lies hidden within those monochrome squares. But I cannot bring myself to unlatch that trapdoor again. Not now. Not with the certain knowledge that something occupies the space above, pacing in the emptiness, drawing closer with every passing hour. I commit this account to paper because the silence is unbearable, because someone must know. Tomorrow I depart. I will sail this cursed farmhouse. put as much distance between myself and this island as geography allows. Perhaps it will not follow me as it followed Renan. Perhaps my luck will hold where his failed. But last evening, whilst packing my bags, a glance at the bedroom window pane's dark mirror stole my breath. For a fleeting, horrifying second, the figure behind me shed its customary blur. I saw its face with perfect clarity. It was smiling. The car eats the miles south towards Dublin, away from the island's suffocating grip. But the rear-view mirror offers no sanctuary. A flicker in the back seat, a distortion at the periphery. Nothing substantial. Not yet. I understand now. Ronan didn't bequeath the farmhouse. He passed his companion. The footsteps never truly stopped. They merely changed their floor. The first glimpse I caught of them, the Ashworths, seeded a conviction. Here was the missing piece, the harmonious chord our sleepy lane had lacked. Elias, Clara, and their small daughter, Lily. They materialized like figures brushed onto canvas, echoes of a sun-drenched, simpler time. Yet now, the flimsy wood of my bedroom door groans under Elias's assault, and I understand the treachery of surfaces. Perfection, I see now with blinding clarity, is merely the most exquisite veil for the abyss. It began 3 months prior under the raw scar tissue of my own life's unraveling. Divorce had left me clinging to this house, a solitary victory in a landscape of loss. Then one luminous Saturday, the hulking shape of a moving van eclipsed the sun next door. From the shadowed sanctuary of my window, I watched the Ashworths decant their existence into the neighboring silence. A house vacant for what felt like an age. Elias possessed an easy grace, tall and sculpted, his smile etching pleasant lines around his eyes. Clara, delicate and fair, her blonde hair captured in a precise ponytail, moved with quiet efficiency. And Lily, barely substantial, a wisp of 5 or 6 years trailed them, a worn stuffed rabbit anchored in her small fist. A pang, sharp and unwelcome, resonated within me. The ghost of the family I'd yearned for, the phantom limb of a future dissolved. Still, convention demanded warmth. Armed with a plate of still warm chocolate chip cookies, I crossed the lawn. Clara opened the door, her smile radiating genuine welcome. "How incredibly kind," she breathed, taking the offering. "Elias, Lily, our neighbor is here." They assembled in the doorway, a tableau of domestic bliss. Elias's handshake was firm, grounding. "A true pleasure," he offered. "We're eager to settle into the rhythm here." Lily peered from the safety of her mother's legs, curiosity winning over shyness. I crouched to her level. "Hello, Lily. I admire your rabbit. Has he got a name?" A solemn nod. "Mr. Flopsy," she confided in a near whisper. A smile touched my lips, unbidden, so utterly, disarmingly normal. What premonition could have pierced such flawless composure? Weeks unfolded, and the Ashworths wove themselves into the neighborhood's fabric with effortless grace. Clara found her place in the local book circle. Elias lent his easy charm to coaching the children's baseball team. Their backyard barbecue became the season's highlight, drawing the entire street into their orbit. Everyone was captivated. I found myself drawn particularly to Clara. Morning coffees became a ritual after Elias departed for work and Lily for school. Ensconced in her pristine kitchen, we'd trade stories and laughter, forging an unexpected intimacy. I'm truly grateful we landed here, Clara confessed one morning, her fingers tracing the warmth of her mug. It felt necessary after, well, after everything. My curiosity stirred. Oh, was there trouble back where you were? A fleeting darkness, quick as a hummingbird's wing, crossed her features before vanishing. Oh, the usual, she deflected smoothly. Sometimes a clean slate is all you need. I let it rest, respecting the veiled boundary. We all carried our unlit rooms. Yet, dissonant notes began to surface in their perfect symphony. Small things, easily dismissed in isolation. The almost imperceptible way Clara would recoil if Elias shifted too abruptly near her. The muffled cadence of arguments leaking through the walls late at night. Lily, once a skipping sunbeam, growing progressively muted. Her small presence receding into shadow. I wrestled with self-doubt, wondering if the wreckage of my own marriage was casting distorted reflections onto their life. But the inconsistencies accumulated, tiny cracks spiderwebbing across the flawless facade. One afternoon, tending my roses, a sharp shatter from next door sliced the quiet air, followed instantly by Clara's stifled cry. I froze, trowel suspended, straining to hear. A beat of tense silence, then Elias's voice, pitched too low to decipher, murmuring insistently. Clara made no further sound. That night became a battleground within me. Intervene? Speak out? But the specter of being wrong, of fracturing their lives based on suspicion, held me captive. Ultimately, I resolved to approach Clara directly. The following morning, I invited her for coffee, rehearsing gentle inquiries. She arrived bearing a faint discoloration high on her cheekbone, artfully, yet imperfectly, masked by foundation. "Clara," I began, my voice softer than intended. "What happened?" Her hand flew to her cheek, a gesture of startled self-consciousness. This, utterly clumsy of me, collided right with the kitchen cabinet door. I inhaled slowly. "Clara, yesterday, I heard something. Are you certain everything is all right?" Her eyes dilated. A spark of raw fear ignited and just as quickly extinguished, replaced by an overly polished brightness. "Absolutely," she insisted, her tone brittle. "Everything is wonderful. Elias and I, we couldn't be happier." The plea behind her eyes, however, screamed a different truth, silencing my urge to press further. She wasn't ready. I couldn't force the lock. The atmosphere shifted palpably after that. Clara's invitations ceased. Our encounters on the street were brief, her smiles taut and ephemeral. And Elias began to watch me. Across the expanse of lawn, I'd feel his gaze, cold, appraising. A primal instinct screamed danger, urged me toward action. The police, a hotline, anything. But paralysis, insidious and cowardly, held sway. It wasn't my place, I rationalized. I might be misinterpreting everything. Until the night Lily screamed. Sleep evaded me. Past midnight, perched by my window, overlooking the darkened street, the sound ripped through the stillness. A child's pure terror, abruptly choked off. Before conscious thought could form, I was across the lawn, my fists hammering against their front door. Elias answered, disheveled, his eyes incandescent with a barely leashed fury. "What?" he spat. "I heard. Lily? Is she all right?" My words stumbled out. His expression morphed, a veneer of solicitous concern sliding over the rage. "A nightmare," he stated, his voice regaining its smooth timbre. "She's fine. Go back home. But past his shoulder, my gaze locked onto Clara. One eye was swollen shut, a dark crescent against her pale skin, and a trickle of blood stained her lower lip. In that fractional second, our eyes met, and I saw it all. The desperation, the silent entreaty. "I'm calling the police," I declared, the tremor in my voice betraying my fear. Elias's mask disintegrated. "You're calling no one," he snarled, advancing. I spun to flee, but his speed eclipsed mine. His hand clamped around my arm like iron, wrenching me inside. The door slammed, sealing the night behind us. What ensued was a descent into chaos. Elias raged, oscillating between venomous threats and manipulative assurances that I was delusional. Clara huddled protectively in a corner, clutching Lily, both trembling violently. A surge of adrenaline propelled me. I broke free, scrambling into their guest room, slamming and locking the door. My fingers, clumsy with panic, found my phone, tucked miraculously into my robe pocket. The 911 dispatcher's voice, calm and methodical, was an anchor. Help was en route, she promised. Endure. But Elias was at the door, his fists raining blows, his voice a feral roar. The wood began to splinter. So I wait, trapped between prayer and primal fear. Outside, the world pulses with strobing red and blue light. Visible through the gap in the curtains, will they breach the threshold in time? With a final sickening crack, the door splinters inwards. Elias fills the doorway, his eyes unhinged, a blade gleaming wickedly in his grip. Reality distorts, time elongating. I see the knife's upward trajectory. I hear Clara's distant scream, then, abruptly, a cacophony of new voices, sharp commands. "Police! Freeze!" Elias's face contorts, rage dissolving into stunned confusion. The knife clatters harmlessly. He crumples under a surge of uniformed bodies. The ensuing hours bleed together, a surreal montage of flashing lights and clipped questions. Statements given, forms filled. Clara and Lily, swaddled in blankets like fragile survivors, are guided towards waiting ambulances. Elias is forced into the back of a cruiser, his gaze finding mine through the rear window, cold and unrepentant. As dawn paints the sky in bruised pastels, a weary officer with kind eyes approaches. "You did the right thing," she says, her voice gentle. "You likely saved their lives tonight." But watching Clara and Lily disappear down the street, contemplating the months of gnawing suspicion I'd swallowed down, heroism feels like a borrowed coat, ill-fitting and heavy. The officer observes my expression. "Hey," she adds softly, "don't carry that. You acted when it counted most." I manage a nod, though the guilt remains, a persistent ache. Returning to the quiet solitude of my own house feels like crossing into another dimension. The illusion of neighborhood serenity lies shattered around my feet. In the days that follow, fragments of the Ashworth's history surface. Whispered accounts from previous towns, a pattern of abrupt departures, shadows of fear left in their wake. How many others, I wonder, had glimpsed the cracks and chosen to look away? Clara and Lily never return. Word filters back that they sought refuge with Clara's sister, states away. I hope they find sanctuary, a path toward mending. For me, there is only the stark awareness that monstrosity can wear the most commonplace disguise. that true neighborliness sometimes demands the courage to shatter the peace, to risk entanglement in another's darkness. The house next door now stands hollow, a vacant monument to the secrets it guarded. And each night, the darkness presses closer, filled with the imagined echoes of lives unfolding behind closed doors, leaving me to question whether, should another scream pierce the quiet, I would find the strength to answer.